Listen to them, the children of the night. What music they make. Hello everyone, it's the season of Halloween, and today I decided to share my top 10 favorite Universal monster movies that had quite a rich history on film through the 30s and 40s with monster movies, and these are just 10 of my favorite. My list might greatly differ from yours, so before I continue, feel free to share your favorite Universal monster movies down in the comments below. Starting is Son of Frankenstein. This is the third entry in the Frankenstein series, and I have to say, even though it's not up to the level of Bride of Frankenstein, it's still a solid movie in its own right. Boris Karloff returns as the monster, and we also have Bela Lugosi as Igor, a very different version of Igor. He was somebody who was sentenced to death, declared dead after a hanging, and he survived, so he kind of has like this neck thing going on. And Bela Lugosi gives one of his finest performances on film. This also has Basil Rathbone as Baron Wolf von Frankenstein. He is the son of Henry Frankenstein, not Victor like in the novels, but Henry. And he basically comes back to the town where his father was in the first two films, and he tries to basically continue his father's legacy. He feels that he was wrong, that the townspeople have a different idea about what's going on and what he was all about. He meets Igor, who has ulterior motives, and of course the monster returns. This time not speaking, he's more like he is in the original film, and Boris Karloff gives a great performance as far as his last time playing Frankenstein in one of the main feature films. After that, at number 9 is The Phantom of the Opera from 1925. I love this film, and I'm talking about the 20s film. There's one later. Technically, this isn't part of the main Universal Monsters lineup, but I'm going to count it because it is a Universal monster movie and a lot of the same creative people. This time we have Lon Chaney. That's right, Lon Chaney Jr.'s father, playing the Phantom. And of course, this one, if you've seen the musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber, you know what's going to happen, or any other incarnations. This one's much more close to the book than some of the other incarnations. And I love the makeup here. It's ghastly, his appearance. And Lon Chaney did a lot of his own makeup for this. And don't be fooled that this is a silent film. It still has plenty of thrills, scares, and a great story with just text. The way it's filmed for its age is pretty well done, I think. We also have Mary Philbin as Christine. It's great seeing this disfigured composer seek love from a young singer. It's much like the tale of Phantom of the Opera that you're familiar with. We get more with Raoul and Christine, and much more with the theater group. It's not done to the music of Andrew Lloyd Webber, but it's still great to see Lon Chaney's acting and how actors were able to convey so much without dialogue. That reveal scene still is one of the creepiest scenes I've seen in film. I think what amazes me about older Universal monster films is how they were able to do so much with so little, compared to films now. And they still hold up nearly 100 years later. After that is Draculas Daughter. This is the sequel to Dracula. Only Edward Van Sloan returns, this time as Von Helsing. He's supposed to be Van Helsing, but they had to switch it to Von Helsing. We also have Gloria Holden give a fantastic performance as Countess Maria Zaleska. And then we have Otto Kruger as Jeffrey Garth. He's a doctor. Van Helsing's been arrested after staking Dracula. They think he murdered someone, so a doctor has to come to his defense. Meanwhile, Gloria Holden as the Countess tries to find her father because she was Dracula's daughter, and she believes to be completely cured of her disease as vampirism. They have to burn the body. So we get to deal with her not loving being a vampire. There's so much here, so much subtext that Anne Rice was inspired from to make Interview with the Vampire and the Vampire Chronicles. I love this tragic figure. This is an underrated monster film and one of the last of the original phase of Universal monster movies. This is such an eerie film, and while it's not up to the level of the Bela Lugosi film or the Spanish film, it still is a solid film in its own right. Amidst all the production problems, I love it. I think it is criminally underrated, and I wouldn't mind seeing a modern remake of this. This is such a great film that was ahead of its time. After that is Creature from the Black Lagoon. Oh yeah, Gillman. Yeah, this is a creepy kind of more science fiction monster film compared to the other Universal films. You know, you have Julie Adams as Kay Lawrence. This is very well shot. It's kind of hard to think about now with so many films and so many advancements, but for its time, it was pretty groundbreaking and beautiful the way this was shot. So many moments of just terror, you know, underwater, seeing two different stuntmen as the Gill Man. But I like seeing these group of doctors, these scientists, basically find skeletal remains of like this creature, and they want to find more in the Amazon. When they go to the Black Lagoon, that's when they find this prehistoric monster who is just frightening. Something so simple yet frightening with this Gill Man, how he just stalks this woman, kidnaps her, and has to basically terrorize these scientists and prevent them from leaving this lagoon. This is like everything you want from like a science fiction horror monster film. Next up is The Invisible Man, the original film from 1933. This film was state-of-the-art for its age. Of course, it's based on the H.G. Wells novel. It's about a scientist who becomes invisible, but because of the chemicals, or should I say the drug, in this case, in the film version, he becomes murderously mad. He becomes insane. And he's terrifying. I love the effects here, how they were able to pull off the effects in this film with the invisible effects. Some stuff may seem silly by today's standards, but you got to think back in the early 30s, this is pretty groundbreaking. And in some scenes, they had the actor wear black velvet against a black velvet background. And you have Claude Rains as Dr. Jack Griffin, aka the Invisible Man. For any film aficionados out there, Jack Griffin was also not only Larry Talbot's father in The Wolfman, but you may have recognized him from Casablanca, classic film. And he was a great actor that was just perfect because you didn't have to see him, but he had this voice that I think was perfect for the Invisible Man. And I love seeing this experiment. I mean, we've seen the remake done by Universal a couple years ago wonderfully. The film Hollow Man with Kevin Bacon. All the Invisible Man films all owe it to this Universal monster movie. It is one of the best and earliest adaptations. And of course, it had a couple of follow-ups, but I still love this first one. I think it's one of the best Universal monster movies. Next up is The Mummy from 1932. That's right, Boris Karloff, famous from Frankenstein, he plays Imhotep, aka Ardeth Bey, which is an anagram for Death of Ra. Yeah, this film's very different than some of the other Mummy movies. I enjoyed this film. I rented it from Hollywood Video after seeing The Mummy in 1999. I saw the classic Universal Monster Movie collection on VHS, the trailer for it on The Mummy with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. And after loving that film, I had to check out the original. And this is a very different film, but it's still a love story in many ways about a tragic figure. That's what I like, is that you can relate to the monsters and they all have like tragic stories. But you have Zita Johann as Helen Grosvenor, David Manners as Frank Wimple. You may recognize David Manners in another Universal film as Jonathan Harker in Dracula. What's special about The Mummy is like the way the effects look and how they transform Boris Karloff, but the love story, that's the drive of it. And what I like about this is that unlike some other Universal adaptations, this is not based on a novel. They actually took influence from the opening, or should I say discovery, of King Tut and how they opened its tomb in 1922. So that's kind of cool. And Imhotep, you know, many people think, oh, he's a disgraced priest and stuff. It's not like the 30s film, and it's not like the 90s, early 2000s films. No, Imhotep was actually an architect in Egyptian history. He actually built the first step pyramid and other things. He's well regarded. He's not a disgrace in Egyptian history at all. But it's cool how they still use like the name of a real person and added it here. And everything you see in Mummy movies is owed to this film. I just love seeing Imhotep try to find his princess, Anaxinamen. You know, Anaxinamun in the other one, but Anaxinamen. He thinks that this Helen character is her, and he wants to have her reincarnated. It's a very different film. If you're expecting the Mummy to go kill a bunch of architects and stuff, you're not going to get that until the other sequel/reboot films. Mummy's Hand, Mummy's Tomb, Curse the Mummy, Mummy's Ghost. It's weird seeing how like the 99 film is like this mixed with those films put together, but I still like this. There's just something about Boris Karloff's performance in a creature feature that's just perfect in this with a romance story. And I love The Mummy. I just have a soft spot for The Mummy ever since I saw it at a young age on VHS. Next up is Frankenstein from 1931. The first two Frankenstein movies stood the test of time. I love this first Frankenstein movie. They kind of created the prototypical Frankenstein image you see in Halloween, you know? Like Dracula and Frankenstein might have been described differently in the novels. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was a bit different, but I like seeing this modernization with like the flathead, the bolts and screws, and how they created that image. Boris Karloff is the monster, and he was 44 years old when he did this and broke out in this role in the monster films, and it's just amazing. He gives a phenomenal performance. He gives the heart and soul to this monster. He makes us feel sympathy for this monster, for Frankenstein's monster. And of course, Dr. Frankenstein is played by Colin Clive. He's Henry Frankenstein. He's not Victor Frankenstein like in the novel, but I like his role. We also have Edward Van Sloan as Dr. Waldman, and Dwight Fry is Fritz. That's right, Renfield from Dracula. If you've seen Young Frankenstein, some of this might actually be pretty funny, Frankenstein, but I love it. It's alive! It's alive! A classic Frankenstein story. I love seeing Henry Frankenstein create this monster and then it basically get out of his hands and lose control of it, and he's trying to destroy it, and it hurts people. And there's that one scene with the little girl where you just feel sympathy for it, the monster. She doesn't see a monster, She sees this person. They're playing flowers, and then by accident he murders her, throws her into the lake. It's just haunting. That's some dark stuff. Even by today's standards, that's pretty freaking dark. Like, damn. And I love the showdown, everything that happens there. This is just one of the finest monster movies. Joining Frankenstein, the Mummy, and Dracula and the Invisible Man is The Wolfman from 1941. This stars Lon Chaney Jr. as Larry Talbot, and of course has Claude Rains playing Sir John Talbot. And there is Werewolf of London. Not a bad film in its own right, but I think this is a stronger film still. They kind of did the reboot thing, but in the early 40s. And Lon Chaney Jr. gives a fine performance. My introduction to this was actually the footage they showed in the movie Beethoven, when Charles Grodin was asleep and Beethoven was watching like a horror movie. I was like, what's this movie? And I discovered The Wolfman. Saw this on Turner Classic Movie one year when I was sick, and I absolutely love this story of Larry Talbot coming back home, having issues with his father, but then also helping this woman one night, seeing an attack, being cursed, seeing this gypsy, and then becoming a werewolf. And we don't see him too much in the movie as a werewolf. These films were kind of short, and they kind of built up, like the title of the film kind of built up to the end. But I love the effects. They still hold up to this day, and there's something about the black and white and the makeup and the lighting that's just creepy. These films, while they may not be overly vulgar or gory like later incarnations and other decades, these films have a creepy gothic atmosphere that hasn't really been replicated in cinema. After that is Bride of Frankenstein. This is a sequel that surpasses the original, and I think it's probably the best Universal monster sequel, and to some it might be the best Universal monster movie. I loved the complexity of this film. Boris Karloff again returns as a mummy. You have Colin Clive as Henry Frankenstein, but then you have Elsa Lanchester as Mary Shelley and the Bride of Frankenstein. And it's cool seeing Mary Shelley talk, starting with a prologue in a different time period, because we had the warning in the first Frankenstein, and this one starts with the actual author talking about what may have happened next, and then it goes into that story. And it's cool how she's brought about, she's the title character, but we don't really see her until like the last part of the movie. And we also have James Whale return as director. He did The Invisible Man and the first Frankenstein. And one of the characters I love in this sequel is Dr. Pretorius. He is so creepy with his experiments, seeing the miniature people in the glass jars, but also how he wants to exploit Frankenstein's experiments and modify them for his own gain. It's so crazy seeing what he does with not only the Bride of Frankenstein, but with the monster himself. Boris Karloff gives another fantastic performance. The monster becomes more complex here by being able to learn how to speak and becoming more aware of his existence and who he is. I love that. There is this portion of the movie where he goes and hides out at this old man's cabin, and the man is blind, so he thinks that the monster is mute. He doesn't know it's a monster, and he befriends him. There's some sweet, heartfelt stuff there. But what makes it is ultimately Dr. Pretorius bring in Henry Frankenstein out of like so-called retirement to finish this experiment and modify it and work on it, try to perfect it, compared to the first time. We get to see like Frankenstein's like madness start to grow, but then also his despair when he realized what he's done. And I love the reveal with the Bride of Frankenstein, the design she has, but also the tragic part of this movie is they build a partner for the monster, but his partner doesn't even want him. She screams. She can't stand the sight of him. And he realizes he cannot be loved, and he decides to let Dr. Frankenstein and his bride go, and he basically gets Dr. Pretorius, the bride, and himself, and blows up the lab. And that's where it ends. That's a dark, ending. It kind of reminded me of like going from Planet of the Apes to Beneath the Planet of the Apes in a way. And I don't know if they should have made a sequel. Like, this is a perfect ending and a tragic yet fitting ending for the monster. This is one sequel that improves upon every theme of the first film and does it better. And this is one of the finest Universal monster movies I have seen. My favorite Universal monster movie is Dracula. I have a special place in my heart for Dracula. I saw this on VHS and Turner Classic Movie as a kid. There's something about Bela Lugosi's performance that is iconic. He is the reason why Dracula is so engraved into our pop culture. Count Chocula, every vampire in cinema for the next 100 years all owe it to Bela Lugosi's performance in this. You had Nosferatu come out before with Count Orlok, played by Max Schreck. But this film, every image of vampires that you have in your head comes from this film. Dwight Frye as Renfield is terrifying. In some ways, he's even scarier than Dracula himself with his lunacy. Edward Van Sloan is fantastic as Van Helsing, probably one of my favorite Van Helsings. This and the Spanish version of Dracula are both amazing films. I love the use of Swan Lake Suite at the beginning. Oh man, just the plot of it. And again, they did have to make modifications, not only with the budget going around with the Great Depression, but also there's a lot of stuff in the novel that they couldn't get away with back then. So they changed some stuff, like Renfield being there. They kind of did a little bit of the Dracula's guest thing, but they didn't have Jonathan Harker there. He's kind of put to the side. And they changed some other things with Dracula's appearance and other parts that were in the novel. But I like seeing the Voyage to Demeter and how Dracula comes in, shapeshifts, the effects used in this. And, there's a score version from 1998 with Philip Glass as a composer. I thought I was going to love watching this with music. I don't like it with music. This is a creepy film to watch without music. The silence of it, the static framing, it's almost like a play where it's just like set frames. But the scope of this is just creepy, eerie, and just scary with the lighting. And Bela Lugosi's eyes are just mesmerizing and frightening all at the same time. This is such an amazing film where they ultimately have to defeat this monster of Dracula. It's probably my favorite Universal monster movie, but I have to say all of them are special for their time, especially the first wave of Universal monster movies in the 30s to like early 40s. Those are the best. And yeah, I hope everyone checks out some of these films. Let me know your favorite Universal monster movie you enjoy watching around the Halloween season. Till next time, everyone.